Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Core Growth Show. I'm delighted to announce my next guest in Chris Stothers, who is an ex-PSNI officer who has an amazing story to share, and also what he's doing now to give back to the community, to people, the first responders, and everybody within that industry as well. So, Chris, first and foremost, thanks for coming on the show. And how are you?
I'm all good. Thanks, Gary, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you very much. I'm all good.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So let's start off with who you are. What made you become a police officer working with PSNI?
Well, I suppose who am I? I'm Chris Stothers. I am 44 years of age. I've had a hard paper round, but I grew up in Clockey on the Arts Peninsula, down near Portaferry, if anybody knows it. And the reason we lived there was because I was born in 1982 in Belfast, but mum and dad were a mixed marriage. So rather than bring a family up with the issues that brought at that time in Belfast, they moved us down into the country for a quieter life and an area that didn't have the same political issues that Belfast did. So I can't pretend that my life growing up was anything less than idyllic. You know, I grew up in a mixed household. Mum was Catholic, dad was Protestant, but we were very much shielded from the issues that were going on within Northern Ireland at that time. So yeah, that was it. I grew up and had a great sort of younger years. I'd always wanted to have a job though that, probably in uniform, a job that gave me that fulfillment, a job of service, I suppose. So it was either the military or policing. And as luck would have it, I joined the PSNI in January 2003. Obviously, I've left my phone on.
Hey, you're off the force now. You can do whatever you want. But brilliant. And I suppose that's the start of your journey. So growing up, probably a bit like myself, I grew up in Onoma, and we were, I suppose, of similar age. I was born in 85, and we were shielded enough, I suppose, a little bit. You know, you used to have the army still going through the thing. We had the Oma bomb, which had a big impact on us, but united us a lot more maybe after.
Yeah.
But the question would be, and even with that, is a similar thing, is whenever it came then to joining the police, did you ever feel that there was a stigma attached to it, or did you feel a lot easier coming from mixed family?
I wouldn't say that coming from a mixed religion was never really a thing in our house. You know, it was never, politics were never a thing in our house. It never. I can't say that the mixed marriage was sort of swayed me one way or the other around my beliefs towards policing. But I think the area in which I grew up probably did, in that we didn't have the military on the streets. We didn't see police. You know, I live in the peninsula. It's very rare we've seen a police car. So when I seen a police officer, I was afraid of them. You know, I still had that fear of police. So yeah, I don't think that it swayed me one way or the other, or that that I had a negative belief towards it, or any belief really. It's just something I wanted to do.
Brilliant. And again, pretty rare as well too at times, or I don't know, I suppose I'm being assumptuous, but even when you're joining that, you know, when you're joining the force, that's literally what you want to do, to serve. But did you find that then, whenever you did go to join, that there was a mix of religion, mix of people, that we're here to serve, we're here because we're fulfilling something that we wanted to do? Was that the general feel within whenever you first joined?
I would say so. Like I was the youngest in my squad. I was only 20 when I went into Carnival, and very naive. You know, I didn't really have a grasp of what I was getting myself into. You know, let's face it. Yes, there was the ceasefire, the Good Friday Agreement of '98. You know, was long enough past, but there's still, things weren't perfect. I didn't really understand that, I suppose. Not that I didn't understand it, I didn't appreciate the sort of the differences and the ill feeling in some communities out there still within the country.
Yeah, that's a big thing, and it's, I suppose that was a whole part of your journey when you did join the police, that you were starting to. This was your first experience, really, because even though you're living in Northern Ireland, you can watch the news, you can do that. As you rightly said, you're living in a peninsula. You're seeing the police on TV, and it was like beginning we all used to dress up. We used to do everything. Like, I want to
Yeah.
serve. Now you've been thrusted into this and you're going into these communities. You're going, oh my God, I'm hated here. What did that feel like? Or did you go, did I make a right decision? What was your thoughts going through that?
I loved it. I still love it. I still think it's the best job in the world. Policing give me so much. I made lifelong friends who I'm still friends with today. It gave me experiences that people only, they hear about, but they don't think actually goes on. It put me in environments that I never thought I would have been in. And I'm very grateful for that. Now, with that, obviously comes a toll. You have to pay a toll for that. But yeah, I loved it. It was exciting as a 20-year-old. That's what I wanted to do. You're out there chasing cars and sort of, involved in public disorder and just really cool stuff that I suppose as a 20-year-old wee fella, it's what I wanted to do.
Brain not fully developed, full of adrenaline, full of everything. Just get me out here. Let's go for this. Like, fantastic. Yeah. And with that then too, so talk us through, your journey from that, from joining to where did you actually get to within the service? How did that manifest itself?
Well, I suppose if I go right back and I look at my time in Garnival, as I said, I was the youngest in the squad, and it was a baptism of fire because all of a sudden I went from a kid who grew up in Cloggy and in a rural village to being told about the threat that police officers and military were under, personal security, checking my car, carrying a PPW on a daily basis. And all of a sudden that wee fella who didn't know anything about this is thrust into that environment. So you have to learn very quickly, sink or swim, I suppose. When I first came out of Garnival and went through all the training, I was stationed in North Belfast. So again, this was a total alien environment to the one which I grew up in. Within the first few days of being there, first week anyway, there was a serious riot at our own shop fronts. I'd never been in a riot before. Certainly I'd never been in a riot as a police officer before. Well, no, I'd never been in the riot before either.
Yeah, just way, but I would just clear that up. Like,
yeah. But I, it was cool. But again, that undeveloped brain, that adrenaline seeker, wanted to be there, wanted to be in the middle of that. But at the same time, it was frightening. It's a scary environment to be in. And I suppose that's how I was living my life now. I was going to work for 12, 14, 16 hours at a time. You're in that environment. You're in a heightened state of awareness throughout those hours. You leave the station, you were driving home back down to still living on the Arch Peninsula, driving home, and you still had that fear of attack or somebody following you home or whatever, so you're very suddenly you're in that state of awareness constantly, and you don't realize at the time, but it definitely changes you. It definitely has an effect on you, albeit when you're in that moment, you do it, you deal with it, and you sort of adapt, and it becomes you.
I was going to say, did it ever get to the stage where that became your normality? You're just, I just go out and have to check the car. This is normal. Because I remember working with a guy, he was ex-police, and we were working together in the gym, and he says one of his scariest moments, still is when he got to the end of his driveway because he was laying with like bushes the other side, and he's like, I have to stop. He says, that was probably my most vulnerable point every day of my life.
Yeah.
There. He's like, and I just had that fear that anybody could be waiting for me right there. Did that ever become normal?
I think the bigger question is, when will that leave me? Because I don't think it ever does leave you. Your brain becomes so used to dynamically assessing situations that I think it's very hard to switch off. And even now, I find myself doing it constantly. Just what you've described there, I was stationed in Old Park in North Belfast, and it was the same. When you left the station, you drove a short, maybe a 300-400 meter road to a T-junction, and it was a choke point, as it would have been called. Just, you had to pass through it, and it was always one of those areas of vulnerability where I always felt, and my colleagues always felt, very exposed. So yeah, I totally sort of get where your friends come from.
That.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that probably brings us on, even, I know you're involved in NSID as well, but there's a lot of mental strain, a lot of energy that's expended. And as you said, it's constant. It's nearly your new subconscious. It's ingrained in there. It's nearly your automation. How did that have an effect on you while in the police, or is it more effective you outside of it when you finished, or even after your day?
Well, I think both. You know, really, it affects you. So everybody joins the police. Well, in my belief, it's my core belief that I joined the police to help people. I joined the police to make a difference because it's what I want to do, and that's a testament probably to my upbringing, my parents. But when you're working in that environment where there's clear hatred towards policing, and whether that's from whatever community, from the Nationalist Republican community or the Loyalist Unionist community, there is that hatred, you know, towards policing. When you're in that environment all the time, you don't feel it. I certainly didn't feel it, but you toughen to it. You harden. And I suppose I've recently written a book, and the way I described it is that a stonemason who is handling stones every day, it would be inconceivable to think that man's hands, man or woman's hands, wouldn't get calloused through time. Well, how can it be any different for somebody who's dealing with that? How can their brain not become calloused and hardened when it's working in that environment? That's very arty because that's not me, but that's the way I've described it in
Yes.
my book. You
But
know?
but it's a lovely way to describe it, but there's also, it's not that, are you just covering over, I suppose, the cracks there? Because, yeah, you're getting callous, but what's happening underneath? It's the same with yours, you know, and I know
Yeah.
that's a journey maybe you're taking now, that with mental health, and, you know, you want to explain, you went through during your time a huge trauma, really, let's call it, with it, like an incident as well too within the police.
Yeah, yeah. Several, you know, working in North Belfast, I was involved with many riots. In fact, you know, many car chases and stolen vehicles rammed several times, and loads of different incidents, terrorist-related incidents. But I think the one you're referring to is the night I myself was shot, which was the biggest thing, undoubtedly the biggest thing that happened to me. Do you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, do, because yeah, not to take away from you, but everything you've talked to it seems like it's constantly chipping away. You talked about that stonemason where you're constantly threat to now having this huge trauma, this huge incident where you've been shot, you know, as well too. So,
Yeah.
are you happy enough to talk about that as
Yeah,
well?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that was I'd started duty on the 11th of July, 2010. I was part of a public order unit responsible for North Belfast. There had been quite a lot of rioting previously in the previous weeks, but most of that had been over towards Broadway and West Belfast. And that night was no different. It had kicked off in Broadway. Most of the public order units were sort of dispatched over there along with the water cannons. But the inevitable happened and rioting broke out on North Queen Street in the New Lodge area of North Belfast, if you're familiar with it. So we were the public order unit dispatched to it, but unfortunately at that time our unit was split. So there was only two crews initially responded and tried to deal with it as best we could. And the inevitable happened. It sort of broke out into a full-scale riot. We were bolstered by the rest of the crew and managed to get a bit of a shield line in. Prior to that, it had been quite hot and heavy, some hand-to-hand fighting. The crowd had been raining sort of heavy masonry down on us. And I've always said, I can't remember if there was petrol bombs thrown at us at that time. I can't remember, but I believe there was. And this just went on. It went on for quite a while, and it was hot and heavy. At one point, we were supported with another public order unit, and there was a decision made that we would take the junction of Spalmount Street, whilst the other unit would push down and take the main riot in North Queen Street. The order was given, and we broke ground, took the junction, and just as that happened, we were starting to reform, and I heard those words that no peeler ever wants to hear, is gunman, gunman. There was a loud bang, and I wish I felt like a blast wave washing over me. I actually turned to the guy beside me and said, "Flipmate, that was close." I didn't say flipmate, but I said that was close. And no sooner the words out of my mouth and my arm just fell. I couldn't hold the shield up any longer. My arm fell, the shield fell to a trail, and just the pain hit me. So I realised then that I'd been hurt. I didn't realise I'd been shot, but I realised I'd been badly hurt. I knew there was a gunman. I heard that shout. Would manage to get into some hard cover. Said to one of the inspectors who'd been sent down to try and get a grip of things, "Boss, I think I've been hurt." He started ripping my public order pads off, and by now I could feel blood sort of running down my chest and welling up inside my blue suit. So realised I was bad enough. Managed to get down North Queen Street into a police car which was sitting sort of observing things and giving a readout back to the control room. And a friend of mine, he took me up to the hospital, Meter Hospital. I was in a lot of pain, but I still at this point didn't really realize or appreciate that I had been shot. So as we arrived at the hospital, there was a crash team waiting of nurses and doctors waiting outside the Meter Hospital. I got in, they got me onto a bed and started cutting off my blue suit. And for the first time then I could see that I had quite bad injuries to my chest and abdomen, but mainly my arm, the main blast in my arm. A lady, a nurse, an older nurse, had managed to get a line into me, and she was squeezing a bag of fluids. She kept saying, stay with me, stay with me. And I was thinking, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm in hospital. Where am I going? So then at that point, I looked down and my hands were grey. They just looked like a corpse. We'd been involved with quite heavy fighting prior to that. I was probably dehydrated. And then obviously the shock of being shot. I think everything was just that my internal organs were looking for that blood, and I just looked like a corpse. My external extremities were grey. And at that point, Mark Taylor, who was the surgeon, he came over and said, we're going to take you for surgery. I didn't want somebody else ringing mum and dad, though. I didn't want another police officer ringing my parents to tell them their son had been shot. So I rang home, and I've told this story. I'm fed up telling this story, actually, about making this phone call to mum and dad in the middle of the night. This was probably 2 a.m, thereabouts, I'm guessing. I rang home, rang the house phone, and dad answered. And he was half asleep, obviously, the time of night. I said, don't be panicking, I'm in hospital. He said, right, okay, what's wrong? And again, I said, don't be panicking, I'm fine, but I've been shot. And he said, right, okay. And he hung up the phone. I thought, flip, he took that well. And that was it. I thought, I'm okay for surgery now. Dad knows. But then the phone rang back. He obviously was dreaming and panicked, rang me. They wanted to come to the hospital, but the place was like a war zone, so they couldn't get near me. I was then taken sort of up for surgery, and the rest is history, I suppose. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's like so much there. And I think even just people that are listening to this, and just visually, like I was sitting there kind of talking through step by step, and until you're there and you see it, like, wow. That's phenomenal. And then first and foremost, how are you now in terms of physical?
Well, physically, I have a lot of pain, so I still have a lot of shrapnel in me. So I was shot by a lone gunman from about 4 meters away with a sawn-off shotgun. So I took the main blast in my arm, chest, and abdomen. So at 50 shotgun pellets entered me. From those 50, I think there's 24, possibly 22, 24 in my arm. But there was 3 entered me lower abdomen and travelled diagonally up through my body, missed everything, and came to rest between my pancreas and my spleen. So I was very fortunate, I was very lucky that Mr. Taylor told me that, in fact, the next morning or sometime after, I remember him shaking my hand, and he said he shook the hand of the luckiest man in Belfast, because those pellets they'd missed my small intestine, large intestine, and somehow hadn't managed to nick anything. So yeah. So now, how am I now? Yeah, I do have a lot of pain. My arm, I would get a lot of pain in my ulnar nerve, radial nerve, forearm, and I have weakness in my left hand. But I'm dead on. I'm grand.
And then that's amazing, like, too. You know what I mean? Just shows you, for whatever reason, that everything had missed. And mentally, then, how were you after that? How did you recover?
I was fine. I at that time, that's not right to say I was fine. It came as a bit of a knock. You join the police and you hear these stories, especially you join the police in Northern Ireland and you hear these stories about things happening to people and terrorist attacks, etc. But I suppose in the back of your mind, it had never happened to me, until it does happen to you. So it had now happened to me. And at the time I thought, well, it's okay. I'm not dead. I know I'll get over this. I know I'll survive this. And I don't want somebody else being the master of my fate, being dictating the script for me. So, I'll come back stronger. To say I didn't question my career would be wrong, but I maybe questioned it for an hour or two, but it was never going to change. I was never going to leave policing because of what happened to me. I had the mental strength and mental fortitude, I think, at that time to move past it.
Brilliant. And then later on, has it, does that still sit with you? Do you ever have your trauma? Does that come back, or are you able to work on that? Have you worked past that, or where are you at now with that?
Well, I'm diagnosed with complex PTSD. The shooting was obviously the biggest thing that ever happened to me, but there was, as a police officer, you see loads of things, and that's a combined, those combined incidents over many, many years. How can not? It's like the calloused hands again. How can that not have an effect on you? So yes, I am diagnosed with complex PTSD, but I'm working through it. I'm continue to sort of. I still get counselling. I still go to a counsellor, and I work through that and coping mechanisms for that. But I wouldn't say the shooting was the one and only thing that caused that. That's been a cognitive, not cognitive, but a combined sort of all the incidents which I went through.
Yeah, interesting too. And again, it's something now which you are looking to help and support others with, and in not only policing, but you're looking at the first responders, blue light. Is this common? How is there facts, is there stats out there? How are people mentally working with the service?
Yeah, well, I think you look at it primarily because it's very close to my heart. The first responders is why I'm doing this, is why I'm telling this story, and why I'm sort of sharing and I suppose revealing my vulnerabilities around this. But primarily it is around the blue light industry. But it's a societal issue, especially men within our society don't talk about the issues that they're facing. And I was one of those guys. I as a father, as a husband, as a parent, you try to shoulder all these issues, and you think you have to have this stoic attitude of, well, I'll just get on with it. I'm myself, I'm the eldest of four boys, so I'm the eldest son, and everybody would have brought their problems to me. And you think you have to be the strong, silent type. You'll not share your issues, but to me, that's actually a strength. If you can sort of talk about it, and it doesn't make you any less or any weaker. To me, it's a strength that you can now talk about your vulnerabilities and talk about how you're feeling, so that you can probably address them and work through it.
Brilliant. And it's a very interesting point, as you say, obviously you're a police officer, but you're still, people still have to remember you're still a brother, you're still a son, then to become a father, you're a partner, you're taking all of this and taking all of that on top. So, what's not happening within the industry overall? Is there things where it's just simply that the services are there, people aren't talking, we need more services? Was there much in your training? Where are they at now with that, or what's not happening for people to talk about it?
Well, like anything, I suppose it's funding. There isn't the funding certainly within the police service. There's not the funding there to support the officers. There's certainly not enough funding at the minute. There's not enough funding for policing. So any funding that is there, it has to go to the front line. It has, the police are there to provide a service. So what falters? The backroom services, the support for police. So there needs to be funding first and foremost. There needs to be more counselling readily available for those officers, and that can't be a 9-to-5 service. That needs to be a service 24/7. But I suppose the biggest point for me is we have to be comfortable at talking about it. We have to be prepared to reach out and seek that help. I can't remember. I do have them. I should have had them ready for this podcast, but the figures are something along the lines of the average person goes through 6 to 10. I don't even think it's as much as that, 6 to 10 traumatic events in their life, or witnessed 6 to 10 traumatic incidents in their life. A police officer, that's 400 to 600. Now, those numbers aren't correct, but they're in around that sort of. So it just shows you the difference in that a police officer, a paramedic, a firefighter, they're experiencing these traumas on a daily basis. what are we doing to support them? We need to do more. It's as simple as that. But yeah, funding, I think funding, more readily available services, and starting these conversations, breaking down that stigma around it, and people being prepared to seek help.
Yeah. And even, I know you know that, but is there anything between male and female? Do you believe it's just still, there's a stigma there? Are female officers and front first responders, are they more open to it? Do they have more networks where they socially do compared to men? What's your thoughts on that? Or
I think, personally, from personal experience, I think women are far better at talking about their feelings than men. And what is the reason for that? You know, I think we're all blissfully aware that is the case. It always has been the case. There's been this stoicism, this stoic attitude with men that we don't talk about our feelings. Certainly in the environments that I worked in was a male only essentially environment where you're being relied on to be that tip of the spear, to go and arrest the really bad guys, to put yourself in danger. So, and there is a buzz of that, you know,
yeah.
it's, you know, you enjoy doing it. You go, you seeking those thrills. So when you come back and you've maybe dealt with something quite traumatic, it nearly feels like a weakness to start talking about how you felt. So yeah, I definitely think women are far better at talking about their feelings and when they're low, sort of reaching out to people than men. So to me, we need to do more to break down that barrier.
Yeah. Is it still a stigma, I suppose, within the service of certain level of macho-ness or being that dominant male within there, and even egotistical to a certain degree, like
No, you're 100%
I meant to take
correct.
this on. You know, I should be. I'm good at this, so this is why I joined the service. I'm strong.
Yeah, I think it becomes part of who we are. It's our identity. So especially with the sort of field that I moved into, that sort of counterterrorism, that specialist firearms role, you know, we were essentially that unit. We were who the police called when they couldn't deal with something. So that then becomes part of you. You're this macho guy, you know, this guy that doesn't cry, doesn't talk about his feelings. You're the guy that'll kick the door down and go and get the bad guy. So yeah, there's a big part of that is ego. Like there's no doubt. How can it not be? But to me now, looking at it retrospectively, I'm still capable of doing those things if I had to. You know, if I was called upon to do those things, I know I could do them. But now I have a better understanding and a better grasp of the effects that has, doing those things has on people. I spoke recently at an event and I talked about when you're young. I'd love to go back and talk to the 20-year-old Chris Stothers. When I joined the police and I heard all these stories about, do you remember the time we did this and we did that, and all these cool, really cool stories. And you think, I can't wait to have those stories. I can't wait to have stories like that. But you don't appreciate having those stories has an effect on you. Having those stories come with their own consequences. You know, so having those stories, yes, there may be cool things to talk about and cool things to reminisce with your friends about, but you don't really grasp, certainly at those younger ages, the consequences that has on your mental health.
Yeah. It's like everything, you know, with the yin and the yang, you know, you give and you take. You know, you said there even earlier, like there's going to be consequences for that. You know, even, yes, this is what I wanted to do, but there was consequences for that. It's like anything in life. And now, but when you're working at a higher level of that, oh my God, this is what we did, but there's going to be a bigger come down. There's going to be a bigger consequence, be that with the energy that you spent on it, the time you spent on it. But now you're really talking about, you know, I suppose physical and more importantly, mental, even spiritual, of the toll that's taken of you living that experience. Like it's huge that, you know, it is a holistic approach, really. You know, it's not like we did this, we get to do this is amazing, and we keep to do this. It's like, no, this had a huge toll because my body was an absolute high adrenaline, ready to go. We talk about fight or flight. I was at the highest level of fight in here. As soon as I come down, there are going to have to be some sort of consequences from taking my body to that extreme. And as you say, to some of us at that high level of adrenaline, of everything, of sustaining that for such a long time, could happen 4 to 6 times, 10 to whatever it is, 100 times more you are going through that there. So there has to be a consequence. So, and is this something now you've left the force as well, that you want to focus on this? You want to help others. What's the next step for you?
Well, I suppose for me, the big thing when I left the PSNI, and again, I left through ill health retirement. Because I had to. My world started to slip, and I didn't understand why. I was in a downward spiral. Now, the guys in work never seen that because I was wearing that mask. I was still the Chris Stothers. I was a big personality, joking, laughing, wearing that mask every day. But who got to see the real me? Well, my wife and my children got to see the real me. They see me when I came home, and I was exhausted, mentally exhausted from putting that front on every day. And you can only do that for so long. I started to slip, and I knew then something wasn't right. 20 odd years of policing within a divided society had taken its toll on me. So I started going to a counsellor, a guy called Michael Patterson, TMR Health Professionals, and Michael undoubtedly saved my life. I was at a very low ebb. So he put me on this path. I started quite a unique story to tell within policing, certainly within my generation of policing. So I started writing a book with the intention of helping others and sharing my story and trying to sort of raise that awareness around the mental health and that side of things. And that just evolved. As I started writing, I started thinking, well, my son had chatted about maybe wanting to join the police at some point. I thought, well, what can I do? My policing career is over. What can I do to maybe break down some of those barriers around policing in this country? And I thought, well, I'm going to do this under my own name. I'm going to put a name to the uniform and try and break down some of those barriers and try to make that job safer for possibly not my son if he doesn't go down that route, but people of his generation. So why would I not do that? Why would I not? I joined the police to help people. Why would I not continue to do that? And with that came a new purpose. I'd lost my identity, almost overnight lost my identity, lost my reason to get up in the morning. But now, through doing this, I have a new purpose, a new reason to get up and a new purpose in life. So that's primarily why I'm doing this.
Brilliant. Yeah, and I think it's a key thing, and I believe we're all put in this earth to serve at whatever level that is. So that might be giving back to your community, it might be charity, it might be what you're doing is you're serving all the time. That's what I believe. Now you have a certain skill set, which will mean that, you're obviously attracted into the police. Yeah, that's where I felt that I could best use my skills. As you said, then that gives you a level of purpose. But if people are listening to this and they do feel in a bit of a spiral, purpose is huge. Living by that, something's been taken away from you, but to know that there's another chapter, there's another, excuse the pun, in your book, you have literally written another chapter of your life, but with the sole purpose not to write a book, but to still serve, to give back. I think that's a huge message. Would you agree with that, in terms of everybody having that purpose and what that's done for you?
Absolutely. And I think just to sort of hammer that home as well, my purpose, as I seen it, was through policing, but it doesn't matter what your career or your journey in life, sometimes that'll come to an end. And I've spoken about this at different events. Should you be an accountant, a solicitor, a farmer, at some point your career will come to an end. So how do we get you from the start to the end of your career in the best condition that you possibly could be? And I believe it's through having these conversations and talking about these things. And I suppose having that acceptance that, yes, it is part of your identity. It becomes part of your identity, whatever your career may be. So how do we sort of soften the blow and prepare people for that next chapter in life? And I think in doing this, not only am I helping police officers and people within the first responders world, but in that corporate world as well. I think there's a real need to have these conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And different people, because I had a lady on the podcast, Michelle Jones, who's like a transition coach, a bit like that, where you can come in too with your level of experience. She had her own story to share where she had cancer. She had lost her mum. She lost her mum first and, had cancer and was in the corporate and was going through her own transitions and was able to relate to many people. Your story will relate to many people, not just as you say in the police world, but anybody, anywhere to say, look, here's what actually happened. I was being chipped away all the time in the role I was. I loved the job I had everything. I was being chipped away. I then did have a huge incident or trauma within that. And then it actually got all taken away from me. As you said, you could relate that to anybody in life. especially in business, can happen a lot. Whereas you could be in a high pressure environment, then bang, bankruptcy hits. You lose a big deal, anything at all. Okay, you have to restructure. You have to try something else. You have a new purpose. So you live in that experience at a very high level, a very dramatic level, can actually share a lot with other people, which I think is a credit to you to take that to then put it, first of all, into writing, and especially can't be underestimated in this country, where people still have that stigma.
Yeah.
People still have that, for you to come in and stand up in front of, of a crowd of mixed religions, mixed opinions, to say, look, forget about who and what I am. Listen to the story. Listen to the message, where I'm here to help and to serve you guys. So that's a credit, and it's brilliant that you're taking action with that, in terms, especially with the book. And what about the book? When is that out, or when's that going to be released?
There's the $1 million question. So
Oh.
the book is done. I've completed the book. I was offered a book deal fairly early on, but it didn't really align with what I didn't have the book finished, so I didn't take the book deal. They've been back and forth. I'm not 100% sure if I want to go down the traditional publishing route. So I'm exploring other options, but the book will be out before the end of this year in one shape or form. So
Brilliant.
That's where we're at.
Well, that's good. Well, even within that, to get to where you are and having that transition there, what are some key tips or advice you could give people? As we've explained that this isn't just people who've been in first responders, in blue light, or in police, but people are maybe have gone through that trauma and looking to repurpose. What advice would you give them that potentially you did?
I think breathe. That's the first thing I would say. Take a step back and take a breath, because when you're in that moment, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. I know from personal experience, you become so focused on the issues and it becomes so overwhelming that you can't see any way out. And I've been there. So my first advice would be just take a step back and breathe. The next thing that really helped me was getting outdoors, getting away from it, just going for a walk and thinking about what the next steps are. What do I do now? What do I want in life? What things are important? And I mean really important. My career was so important to me, but my family is more important. So, and that may not be the case for everybody. I'd imagine it'll be closely aligned to that, but for me, it's getting away from it and looking to see what's really important to you, and then start to rebuild from there. There's nothing that can't be fixed. There's nothing that we can't get over, but we need to know about it. I always tell my children, there's nothing that we can't fix, but I can't fix it if I don't know about it. And I sort of equate that to myself as well. Or if I can't accept that there's something wrong, well, then I can't fix it. It's when we really look inside ourselves and accept that we have an issue and we need to deal with it. That's when we can start to fix it. But until that point, we're in a spin and we're going around in circles. So that'd be my biggest things. Yeah. I suppose fitness is a big thing. Getting outside and getting trained again. I certainly lost my way I was always very fit. I boxed, I skied, I ran, I was involved, and I lost that. I totally lost that because I was in that spin. I was drinking too much. I wasn't looking after myself. And that obviously has a negative impact on how you're living your life. So once I accepted I had a problem, I realized what was important to me. And then I didn't really know how to fix it, but I knew I needed to fix it. So I started looking at those healthier choices, started looking at eating better, cutting down on the drinking initially, and then stopping, and then training. I got back into my training, and it just gave me better mental clarity and let me see a bit clearer for the first time probably in many years. So that's what worked for me. That's, that may not work for everybody, but it worked for me. And the other thing I would say, talk to people. If you are having difficulties, reach out. People want to help. As you said yourself, we all want to help. We all want to serve. People want to help one another, but we have to want to help ourselves. So reach out and share your problems. So yeah, that's pretty much, without going, I could talk all day about this, but without sort of boring you.
No, and you know what? The beauty of that is, especially those first three, was it's the simplicity, and to not overcomplicate it. Like literally what you talked about there was breathe. one thing that we have to do all the time is breathe, and it's something we don't even focus on. Like looking even at higher breath, because if you're in that fight or flight in your sympathetic nervous system where you're constantly breathing, you're going to be in that state. But when we say to people, sit back and breathe, the first initial thought you think is relax, is calm, which is brilliant. And then the good thing you said there was nature. Get outside, disconnect from everything to reconnect, with nature, with yourself, to give yourself space, that you're given that mental gap between there, which it can be challenging. I know myself, I went through my own mental health journey, with depression. And again, it was just kind of that small things and maybe being hard on myself, where it took me a long time to realize that the only person going to get me out of this is myself. And a bit like that, what you said then, the next step of realizing, well, hold on a minute, you are in this, take responsibility. And that is a huge step. And even though that those 3 points there can sound so simplistic, but start with those, and then I love then what you're saying then too, even about you're getting into your fitness again. Get into your fitness, get in something that's going to, as I said, to start a coined term too, is like earn your dopamine, earn that feel good factor. Whereas now a lot of our dopamine comes through screens, especially our young kids, they're getting their dopamine hit through screens, where you earn your dopamine. And it may be fitness, it may be music, it may be anything, it may be knitting, it may be something that gets you into your flow state that actually gives you that separation where you can then go, okay, what is my purpose now? Where am I? Because I'm a clear thinking, which is great. And then the last one, I think, just to reiterate, you mentioned about, there was that support, that help, and that community. I remember myself personally, I had gone through like 3 different counsellors, and got this one is brilliant. And I realised after reflection they were all probably brilliant, but I wasn't ready. But when I find there was the right person at the right time, and I was ready to listen, I was ready to share, I was ready to understand. Where I remember going to some of my counsel session, I was judging them based on perception of who I thought that they were, how could they help me, what degrees did they have, where are they living, what are they doing, and realising, how's that going to help me in any way?
Yeah. I have a bit of a story around that. When I did eventually accept that there was something wrong, and again, I've told the story many, many times, but it was my wife, or now wife, she asked me to take some time off work and for us to get outdoors, and we decided we were going to walk up Cave Hill. So I had taken the day off work, she was off work, we drove to Cave Hill. We hadn't spoke, we left Portaferry, hadn't spoke, got to Cave Hill, still hadn't really spoke, walked in Napoleon's Nose, had hardly spoke, and get back into the car, and she just asked me, what's wrong, tell me what's wrong. I burst out crying, and I say, I'm not a crier. And I said, how can I tell you what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong with me. How can I tell you? So by the time we get home, there's a lot more to the story, but we get home anyway, and she found a counsellor for me. But I've always said the counsellor she found was Michael Patterson. And that's true. But just prior to that, there was another counsellor, and she gave me the number for this lady, and I rang and said, I want to speak to somebody about trauma, about PTSD. And the lady said, yeah, that's fine. I'm an expert in dealing with PTSD, and went through a few bits and pieces, and I thought, perfect, this sounds perfect for me. And just towards the end of the conversation, she said, so what do you actually know about art therapy? I was like, what, painting and shit? So when she said that, now I've no doubt it's a fantastic, in fact I know because I've done it since, it's a fantastic form of therapy. But at that point, bear in mind, at that time I was a CTSFO, counter-terrorism specialist firearms officer, pointing guns at people on a daily basis, going through houses, stopping cars, dealing with serious terrorists. And then I just had this image of me talking about my feelings and painting watercolors. So I was not in a state to even receive that. Whereas when I did find Michael Patterson a few hours later, it was night and day of a difference. It was just, I was ready to receive him and receive that counselling. So it is, you're absolutely right. It's finding the right counsellor for you at that time. You know?
Yeah, brilliant. I know that's just imagine. I just got a visual of you like going doing your work with the police and then coming back and then just like gently pushing these things. It's like
Get
okay,
my numbers.
yeah, brilliant. I know,
Yeah,
and it is right, but and there's so many methods out there, and what you're actually saying there's no right or wrong. It just is.
absolutely.
It's just what it is for you, and it is great. And I think when people are listening to this, please just don't look at this as Chris as telling a story through the police. It's Chris is telling a story that can relate to so many. Take the message from it. Take everything that's going through, and I love the way that the callus with the hands. It's for me as I've got this visual. But it's what's underneath that callus. What damage has been caused? By constantly carrying that rock. And what rock are you carrying? What rock are you constantly lifting every single day that you're not addressing?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, where you had the extreme of I've been chipping away, but somebody just came and gave it a hammer blow to that. So it's
Yeah, I think for me, the policing, what actually happened to me to put me off was an incident where I fell off the side of a ship during a training operation. So I dealt by far not the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now, I did feel like I was drowning and I was under the water for quite a bit. But when I got out of the water, I was laughing and joking about it. The point I'm trying to make is it wasn't that all these traumatic things had happened to me and then just one big thing happened. It was literally that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was just it was a big incident, but it wasn't by any stretch the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was just one thing too much, one thing too far. So, and I
to
suppose
repeat that
that's,
again. But you were saying you were in training, but you fell off the boat, was it?
yeah. So
Like
I was climbing. I know this a bit sort of destroys it,
just
but
random. Like you weren't out like in a wee rubber dinghy and you just fell off the side. You're
no, I was climbing. So I was in a rib, sort of a rigid inflatable boat. We were doing like sort of counterterrorism, CQC, close quarter combat on a ship. So it was a tanker. I was climbing from a rib up the side of this oil tanker type vessel. There was a few mishaps anyway, but I ended up falling from the side of the ship from about 78 meters into the water. I had a flak jacket on, a rifle, and a helmet, so I was sort of dragged under the water quite a bit so it wasn't a great day at the office, to be honest,
yeah.
but by no stretch was it the worst thing. In fact, when I got out of the boat, I was sore, I'd hurt myself, but I was laughing and joking at myself along with the other guys because, again, we were wearing that mask. We have that mask on and we can't be seen to show weakness, so I was nearly making fun of myself in front of the guys. But when I got home that night, that was the floodgates opened. I couldn't sleep. And when I did sleep, felt like I was drowning. So that was just the start of it. I'd dealt with so many things up until this point, and I just kept sort of moving past them. And I'm Chris Stothers. You can't, I can deal with anything until you can't. The way it was described to me, and I think it's a great analogy, is your mind is like a sponge. So everything that happens to you is like a drip of water. If you have a tough day with the kids, it's a drip of water. If you have an argument with the wife, it could be a teaspoon of water. You're involved in a car crash, it could be a tablespoon of water. But eventually that sponge can't take any more water. So the water starts leaking out. And sometimes we need to wring the sponge out. And to me, that's what therapy is. We need to wring the sponge out and get the sponge ready to take those other drips of water so that build that resilience so that it can take those drips of water in the future. But we need to, it's not a one fixed process. We need to do that.
Continuously.
So how do you wring your sponge out?
Yeah.
Well, to me, that could be going for a run. That can be dealing and processing with what you've dealt with that day. Going to the gym, it could be knitting, it could be whatever, some of the examples you've used. So how do we wring our sponge out?
Yeah, no, it's a good analogy that people say because the sponge is going to fill again.
Yeah.
And, potentially each time that you start to wring it, it starts to harden and gets a wee less porous where, it takes a wee bit more to infiltrate, but it's still going to infiltrate. But you wring it out again and essentially think of getting more crustier around the edges as time goes on. And a question for you. So even we go back to that water incident, what would you do different now knowing what you know to help with that incident, aftermath?
The aftermath, I suppose dealing with that incident, I think I was too far gone at that point. And that incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I would have engaged in counselling a lot sooner. I definitely would have engaged in counselling a lot sooner. That being said, the biggest thing for me was when that incident happened, I did ask for support. So I did ask to go and speak to OHW, and I was told it would be 8 to 10 months before I got to speak to anyone. And that was basically because I filled in a triage form. At that time, I wasn't suicidal. So I went to the bottom of the list. Now, that in itself had a really compounding effect on me because I knew I had these issues now. For the first time, I'd sought help around it, and I was told, yes, you can have help, but it's 10 months away. It's 10 months away. And that was a tough one too. That was
In what
really
way?
tough.
In what way was it tough?
In the sense that I knew I didn't have 8 to 10 months. I knew that I had reached the point of no return, I suppose, or I reached a point where I couldn't take anymore. The sponge couldn't take anymore. I needed help there and then. And that's why ultimately I ended up seeking help outside of the police and had to seek help privately.
I think just to context too, the boat incident, did it happen after the shooting?
Yeah. Mm.
No, it
Yes.
happened after the shooting. So I thought you were saying it was happening really soon. So it was that you fell off, but then that's when really you said that was the one.
The shooting. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there, but
No.
the shooting happened in 2010. I had 14 years of a career past that. As I say, I didn't want the shooting to be the end of my career. In fact, I threw myself into policing at that point. I'd always wanted to work in the area of special operations, and through gritted teeth, that's where I ended up. Not gritted teeth, that's not the right phrase, but I perseverance, I suppose.
Yeah.
I got myself fit again. I was unable to sort of grip anything with my left arm at one point. Real weakness in my upper body, but I pushed myself and trained, I suppose, mentally and physically to get into the unit. So it was years after the shooting, and there've been countless other things that had happened post the shooting incident and pre the shooting incident, but the final straw was when I fell off the side of the ship. So that was the straw that broke the camel's back, I suppose.
Yeah, that's like it's huge, like for that, and even at 8 to 10 months, yeah, and then as we say, it comes down to funding, comes down to everything, and there's so much out there. And was it then the next step was the private reach? Was that your next step? Well, thankfully you had a supportive wife who, this isn't you. Let's get out there. And that question where you say, you always ask somebody, is it, how are you? Or she was able to go a wee bit deeper and say, what's wrong? And keep going at that without pestering, come from a place of love for you to turn around and admit and say, I don't know, but how can I answer that? Because I don't know what it is myself.
I've so many stories which sort of highlight how low I was at that point, I suppose. How low I was, but how oblivious I was to how low a state I was in. And one of those, actually, I spoke on Stephen Nolan a few weeks ago and told this very story. But I do a bit of shooting, and Jane seen me walking across the yard with a shotgun, and I walked behind a hedge. I was going to shoot some crows, and she seen me walk behind the hedge, and then she heard a bang. And next thing I remember, she was standing feet away from me in tears. She thought she was coming around to find me having shot myself, which had never even entered my head.
Yeah.
But she could clearly see I was that low, and it was a concern of hers. So that was sort of pre the Napoleon's nose incident. But looking back now, she and Jane and my family had to put up with a lot because I was in such a low mood and low state, but I couldn't see it myself. Because as far as I was concerned, what I was remembering was when I was in work, I was still Chris Stothers wearing this mask and jovial and carrying on. But when I came home and took the mask off, I was in that low state. So.
And did you ever, because again, this is interesting too for people living with people who are going through a mental health crisis, for example, that that they may not even be aware themselves. When you reflect back, was there other incidents where they did try to approach you? You weren't able to accept that? Was there anything, or was it that moment that it took for your wife to say, what's going on?
It was probably that. Now, there had been lots of moments where she had asked or tried to speak to me. I just wasn't receptive of it.
Yeah.
So I suppose it wasn't until I'm quite a deep person anyway. So Jane would be quite fiery in that she'd explode and it's done. Whereas I'd be quite introvert and go into myself and think about things and ponder on things for days. So it probably took for me to do that and reflect on things for quite a while, months probably, before I was receptive of, right, okay, something's wrong here. And even then, it was her constantly asking me and then me exploding and just telling her, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I suppose for me, when I look back now, I was admitting to her that there's something wrong with me, but much more than that, I was admitting to myself for the first time that there was something wrong with me. So yeah, there's lots of learning out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's an interesting point because it's sometimes maybe not highlighted enough as well too, that it's the people that are closest and dearest to you and living with you, you know, when you're going through your own mental health crisis, what effect and toll it has on them, because they could clearly see anything that was happening even before you could accept it. And it was very hard for them to get that across. And it's that perseverance where, and the reality was that she was probably living on that level of, he's going to do something here.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. And seeing that moment, like that was just the one off. She's obviously been thinking that for a while. And it is something, and this is where your story can relate to so many other people in so many different avenues. You know, you talked about your mum and dad. You know what they went through whenever they got that phone call, what you were going through, what your closest, nearest, dearest friends, even your work colleagues who were beside you that day, what trauma were they taking away? You know, the nurses, everybody that's seen you, that nurse sitting there going, stay with me, stay with me, stay with me.
Yeah.
Like there's so many facets of this story that so many people can take so much from.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to unpack a few parts of that, first of all, I think when you're in that state, now we become very selfish because we become very selfish. Maybe isn't the right word, or I think self-consumed is probably better. We become so self-consumed with what is going on within ourselves that we can't appreciate what we're doing to our family and what they're experiencing. And it's only now I can look back and see that was the case. You know, they had to put up with a lot back then. And I'm very grateful and very fortunate that I had the support that I did. Many people don't have that. And, you know, so it's about signposting and showing people that you maybe don't have that direct support, but support is out there and help is out there. There was another part of that. Yes, the trauma side of it. So only last weekend we seen that horrific crash in the south. You know, 5 young lads died. You know, and I'll not get into the whole, because I don't feel it's fair to sort of get into the all bits and pieces of it. But five young lads who passed away, and a family who were seriously injured, and that's horrific. The people who witnessed that, who came upon that on the scene, like they're images that they will have for the rest of their days. The first responders, the fire officers, the fire service personnel, the paramedics, and the police officers, you know, ultimately, and I have no doubt that they are images that will stay with them forever. And they were all there trying to help. You know, you've no doubt that they were all there trying to help. And I think what they experience, they will take that home and they'll reflect on that. And, you know, they may, it's probably not the first time that they've seen such incidents, but, you know, they'll take that home and maybe be quiet for a few days, and their families will be questioning, you know, what do I do in this situation? That's very difficult for a family to deal with as well. We talk about, certainly within policing, Jane always would have said to me, she worried every time I went out the door. She worried every time I went to work. I didn't worry then because I had my friends with me. I had my support network with me. I had my buddies with me. So you dealt with whatever you had to deal with, and you sort of talked about it, and a bit of black humour, dark humour would have come out around that. But that was a support and coping mechanism. The darkest times for me are when I was alone, when I came home, when I didn't have that support network, when I couldn't talk to Jane about the things I'd experienced or talk to my family. They were the dangerous times. They're the times where you really go into yourself.
Yeah, man, it is. There's so much there, like, to unpack, and that's what I mean. Like, you know, the good thing is not only are you talking about it, you're trying to do something, about it as well too. You're taking action, writing the book and all as well too. But one question I had, because again, it's just something personally I went through, was when you were your darkest moments and maybe you weren't, let's call it, accepting it. Did you ever lay blame or become very judgmental?
No, no. Blame. Are you referring to blame towards the police?
Blame
Towards
towards just every situation, or I'm here, this, if this changed or if that changed or if anything in my life was different or if I did this or I did that, anything at all where you're in denial more or less before you're able to accept. Did you ever go through that, or was it just a stage of blank numbness?
I d- there's a lot there, because I don't really know. There's, I suppose, few different facets to that as well. Do I ever lay blame? Do I lay blame on the guy who shot me? Of course I do. I blame him for shooting me. Do I think about him? Not really, because to me he's not worth it. So every time I have any hatred towards him, I'm empowering him with that. So to me, no, I don't. He's clearly a victim of his circumstance and his upbringing, and that's the type of person he is, who thinks that it's acceptable to run up behind somebody and shoot them in the back. And I personally don't think that that's ever an accept. Political reasons or not, I don't think that's acceptable ever. So I don't hold any blame towards him. I don't hold any blame when a lot of police officers, I've come across this quite a bit, police officers leave policing through ill health and through mental health in particular. They have a lot of hatred towards what policing has done to them. I don't feel that. I still think policing is the best job in the world. I loved it. It gave me so much, and I'm so grateful to have been part of it. I'm so grateful and so proud to have wore that uniform, so proud to have been involved in the things I've been involved in. So no, I have no blame towards policing. Could things be done better? Could there be more support for police officers? Absolutely it could. Could there be more support for everybody in society around their well-being, their mental health? Of course there could. And that's why I'm doing this, and I know I'm not going to fix this, but I believe that if I can help one person in doing what I'm doing, then why would I not? So no, I don't hold any blame, or don't have any hatred towards anyone in particular. If anything, when I was at my lowest, I was probably more disappointed in myself, because I had went on for so long thinking I'm the macho man, I can do anything. I've been shot, I can do anything, so it was more disappointment, and I felt like a failure, because all of a sudden I'm a guy who was quite dismissive of mental health, and all of a sudden my world had come crashing down because my mental health had really started to slip. So not blame, I was disappointed in myself at that time, but now I'm not. I know that if anything, it's made me a stronger person today because of what I went through, and it's just further increase my resilience moving forward in life.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, it's very interesting, because again, it was something maybe at my early stages of my own that, I blame situations or circumstances and everything went on, and slowly realizing that it was me. But rightly, as you said there, I think it was a conversation I had with one of my sister's friends who had went through her own uh, dealing with and living with depression. And she more or less put it to me and says, Gary, when you come out of this, you're going to have a story you're going to be able to share, and where you've positioned yourself in your business and in what you do, that you'll be able to help many, you'll be able to help others. And that actually gave me a little lift to go, God, it's actually about serving. It's actually about getting through these really tough times. And I was listening to a podcast of the day too, and it was funny. It was like the guy who created Spartan, the events that they do, and he just kept saying this phrase, like, do hard things. You just do hard things. They call it death camp for kids, but they take them into the wilderness and the life, and they come from a place of love and support. It's not like, this Navy SEAL kind of ring the bell sort of job. It's like, we're not building you up to be the absolute most resilient. It's like, no, we're doing this here to support you. And they're texting their parents, please come and collect me. And some of the parents do come, and years down the line, they say, look, that was probably the wrong decision, because we know what you were doing, because we want you to do hard things. And going through that recovery that you've gone through, and you're still working on it, that's a really hard thing, but you've come out stronger at the end. And now you're trying to teach other people that I know I know you're at a really low place at the moment. I know that this is a struggle, this is everything, and this is a hard thing. But when you come out and you complete this hard thing and you keep working on it, you're going to come out a stronger person. You may not see that at this moment. You may not feel that at this moment, but trust me, this is what I do. So breathe, reconnect, do all of that. And this is where, and constant technique, would you agree that you got yourself to the level that you're constantly wringing that sponge? Maybe it's not getting as full anymore, but you're working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just what you said, there do hard things. I think we always need to push ourselves. We always need to, it's very easy to sit in your hands and blame others for the situation you're in, or sit in your hands and just stagnate and be happy with your environment. To me, that's never been me. I always want to try and push myself. The whole public speaking thing, doing this now, I never in my wildest dreams, I've avoided social media and talking about these things. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, would I be doing this? Absolutely no chance. But it scares the life out of me. It scares the life out of me that I'm being quite, well, I'm here under my own name, telling my story about policing in a divided society, and it is still divided. Thankfully, we've moved in the right direction. We keep going. We've come such a long way, and I'm so proud of it. That's where we're at now, but we've so much more work to do. But I'm doing this under my own name. I'm out there speaking in public and talking about things. As I say, it scares the life out of me, but it's difficult. We don't get better by not trying to do these things. So, yeah, I'm doing hard things.
Doing hard things, and like that's amazing. And I'm just actually going to finish now. I know we've been talking here for a while, and hopefully people have been able to take so much from this, but just a few quick fire questions here. First and foremost, what are your core values?
Core values. Family is at my core. Being true to yourself. Do you know what? I've never actually sat down and thought, what are my real core values? But family is undoubtedly at the root of everything I do. I'm doing this for what I'm doing now, and I've always done it has been for my family. I think being true to yourself has to be at your core. We can kid ourselves and say, we can just kid ourselves and give ourselves these false sort of ideas around our own beliefs and stuff. But I think you have to be true to yourself and just be a good guy. Be, well, I don't know if, don't be a dick. That's my big thing. Don't be a dick. Just be a good guy. Don't treat people as you would like to be treated. I tell my children that, and that's something I try to live by. Well, I do live by.
Brilliant. And again, nice and simple. Like that's just like, he's like the All Blacks. That's one of their things, like no dickheads, dickheads, and that's just one of their mantras. So brilliant. Obviously, apart from your own, but what book would you recommend if general, if people we're talking about what we're talking about now in terms of mental health, or just generally, was there a book that you've read that has stuck out for you?
Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, Susan Jeffers. It was one of the first books that was recommended to me, and it had a big impact on what I'm doing now.
Brilliant. Do hard things.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And then, look, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
There's so many things. I think you can go the whole world peace side of things. I think there is a lot of conflict in the world, unnecessary conflict. Are we ever going to get away from that? I don't think so. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. If I had a magic wand, I want, I suppose this sounds really cheesy, I just want people to be happy and content within themselves. That's because I think that's at the root. If somebody's happy and content within themselves, then they're not going to project that negativity out into the world. That's really cheesy. That's, so.
Well, you know what? It's like, you're not actually, you're fixing something within everybody rather than actually giving something materialist in this world. It's like, oh, you want everybody to be rich, you want everybody this. It's like, if everybody was happy and content and, realizes you don't want everybody to live in Disneyland, you're still going to have that. But whenever you have your bad days, you realize, I'm still happy and content with myself down at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, no, to say, it's your magic wand. You do what you want to do. All right.
What would you do with your magic wand? What would you do?
What would I do? Someone's ever asked me that as well then too. It's like, ooh, I think it was no podcast as well. Somebody did ask me that once. But for me, it was, what did I actually say in that one? It was really just to give everybody a bit like that. that opportunity in life to start without all that trauma behind them.
Yeah.
With that happiness and content, really, you know, I suppose that's just in my mind now because you've said it. But yeah, like given, you know, was somebody said it, you know, especially whenever you think of a child, of an infant that have they had opportunity because they have been born, they are when they're born, you know, some people say they bring on trauma, but to have that environment where there's happiness and contentment around them, it's going to manifest onto everything else that they do.
Yeah.
So I would be in agreement with you, Craig. I'm just going to steal yours. So we'll double up the power.
I think that my core values are inherited definitely from my parents and my upbringing, and I've seen it through policing of, especially in those lesser communities, you know, lesser able communities where people don't have as much and don't have the same support networks and upbringing. We are such a product of our environment and of our upbringing, and I think that that's so important. Like if we can try, and not everybody has that around them, so if we can try and show people that there's a better way to do things, then why would we not? You know, that's sorry to, I know you're trying to close off there.
No, I think it's right, and it brings me back to the point that you made with the person that shot you. You're like, that was just a reaction to the environment that they've been brought up in, their belief, their thing, where they feel that this is okay for me to do this. It's clearly wrong. You know, like it's like that's not morally or sits in value with you as well.
Yeah.
You know, with majority of society, but there is those pockets in society where there isn't that much happy and contentment, and it's pushed out in other forms or other methods. This is how we're going to express our unhappiness and our uncontentment, you know, through this. And again, it goes back to that thing. It's not Disneyland. It's strong morals, be kind, be a good person, don't be a kid, you know, and care for others, serve. Like, keep living by those same things. And if you do veer off, and we all veer off from time to time, can we come back to our moral compass of where we are at, you know? So, no, I think, the cheesy and all that it sounds, I think it's it'll still be strong. So, look, is there anything else that you wanted to mention? I know you had mentioned you were involved in another book as well, potentially.
Yeah, so I've been involved in another book, and it's going to be going into the education system. I'm not going to say the name of it because it's all being sort of nailed down at the minute. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's basically about highlighting the issues of the past and trying to educate sort of young adults and teens about those so that we never repeat them again. So I was asked to write the last chapter from a PSNI officer's point of view in relation to that book, and it was used to close the book off. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud that it's now been published and it's ready to go. So hopefully in the next wee while that will be making its way into the education system within Northern Ireland, and hopefully further afield in due course.
Yeah, sure. You'll be double best-selling author.
So my book, just on that, actually, my book is called Courage in the Chaos. So that's the working title, but I think it's the title I'm going to go with. And the reference to Courage in the Chaos is, so it's having that courage when everything is going wrong around you physically, you know, and I sort of equate that to public disorder or my own shooting or whatever those things are going on, but also that having that courage in the chaos when everything's going wrong in your head, and having that courage to accept what's going on, face it and deal with it. So it's like a double entendre, is that the phrase?
Again. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to put it, because you have a story, you've lived experience, but you've also then had the ability to step back and reflect on it and share how you can help other people through the trauma that you went through and the incidents, everything. So very powerful, and it relates to so many people. So many people are just interested in hearing your story, but then the message behind it, I think that's the most important part. And hopefully that's what people got from today's show and podcast, that a fantastic, gripping story. Like I was, as you spoke, and it was just, it was so well delivered. And then to go, okay, well, what's the message in here? What have I learned? What have I taken from it? And how can I help others? And that's the true courage, really, now what you're doing. So,
thank you. Hopefully so. And hopefully it does help people. I really appreciate that, Gary. Thanks for having me on.
No, so look, thank you, Chris. And again, guys, keep an eye out for the book. We'll be tagging Chris on a lot of stuff, and when it does, we'll be highlighting a few other things that we talked about in the podcast, just to help somebody, because somebody needs to read that book. Somebody is going to help somebody, or if you know somebody that is going to be a perfect gift for them, to pass on. So thank you for sharing that. Good luck with actually publishing the book. It'll be out soon. And yeah, anything else where best people to find it or to find you or to reach out or anything?
Well, I've got into the world of social media, which we discussed earlier. I hate, but I'm on Instagram as Chris Stothers per Medum, and TikTok as well. I think Chris Stothers per Medum, and also on LinkedIn as Chris Stothers per Medum. And just on that, per Medum is actually another thing I came up with when I started this whole journey. And per Medum comes from the Latin phrase per Medum pergendum. And I thought when I'm leaving the police, I am absolutely bricking myself here. But I want to move forward in life. So I looked up the Latin phrase for moving forward despite the presence of fear, per Medum pergendum. And from that, I took per Medum. So per Medum is moving forward despite the presence of fear. And that's what I'm all about. So
very good. Very strong.
Sorry.
No, that's lovely. Again, another something else that somebody can maybe grip onto, and if that's our wee saying to themselves, keep that too. So, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for going through that, for reliving that, but also more importantly, the message that you're trying now to give to others. So, I look forward to the book myself and reading that. I've got the real life person here, or I got the person telling me a thing, but I'll read it as well too, because
there's much more to it. There's a lot more in the book.
It's like the movie. It's like watching the movie. It's like the book was better. The book is better. Still listen to the podcast again, guys. We say this is the very end of it, but the book's going to be better. So, Chris, thank you so much, and guys, thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers, man. Thank you.